I knew something felt off the moment I stepped into that rundown studio, but the offer sounded official: an agent who promised a rising photographer, clean lighting, a portfolio upgrade. I hadn't slept, tossing with phone flashes and followers count spiraling. I was desperate. The place was smaller than the online gallery suggested. Dim overhead bulbs flickered as I waited. He greeted me with a polite smile, hair slicked back, eyes too bright. He said he'd shoot me for a viral series, artistic but edgy. I posed, soft, respectful directions. Until he didn't. I blinked when things shifted. The door locked. Two men appeared: Dan the photographer, and Todd the assistant. The studio wasn't one room, it was a trap. Don's voice was low but firm. "We need ransom. $250,000. You have assets. Your agent will pay." Suddenly, this wasn't art, it was blackmail. I was the bait. My heart thudded as fear replaced hope. They drove me out. I watched the city blur as anxiety clenched my ribs. In an isolated cabin, miles from town, they left me in a high chair. There was no negotiation, just surveillance cameras and whispered threats. Dan played the ringleader, but inconsistencies hinted at more chaos beneath. Black Plague, they called their group. But Todd sneered at the name, revealing cracks in their own story. The ransom demands felt recycled. That first night, I cried softly into my sweatshirt. I texted my mom, "I'm scared." No answer. Messages went unanswered. It felt like betrayal. Todd brought me cold food, acted almost human briefly. He asked about my dog, soothing words I clung to. But the cameras watched. I don't know if it was empathy or leverage. Over days, Dan interrogated me: why I posed nude, why I flaunted my life online. He blamed my vanity. He circled me as if I were a predator. Todd stayed awkwardly distant, fearful. I pieced together. Dan orchestrated this. Todd was uneasy. Maybe didn't sign up for this. Pity and terror warred in his eyes. Then my mom enlisted help. John, my ex, became a reluctant hero. Todd followed shadows. Footsteps crept around the cabin late at night. I'd hear them. Todd's phone recording app. A muted whisper. He tried to help once. I heard him say into his palm mic, "She trusts me," but Dan caught him. Consequence: Todd was kept in a separate room. Punished. I had to rely on my wits. When Dan brought me a mirror and said, "Contemplate what you've done," I pretended to comply. Instead, I memorized his daily routine: when he drank, when he cleaned his gun holster. I watched the cameras. I tested the door lock. It wasn't secure. There was hope, an unlocked window. One dawn, when Dan stepped away, leaving Todd chained up in his room, I used brutal calm. I loosened the chain with a hairpin I'd hidden. Todd trembled when freed. We crept to the front door. Dan returned unexpectedly. Adrenaline surged. There was no time for courage, only escape. We fled into the forest. Todd showed me a narrow dirt road winding between trees that clawed at us like angry shadows. My breath burned. My legs were jelly. But I kept running. I had no choice. Behind us, I could hear the crunch of leaves, the shifting of weight, the echo of someone following. Then tires, not far, sirens, blue and red lights blinked through the fog between the trees. For a second, I thought I was hallucinating, but the voice that came next was real. Jessica. It was my mom. My knees buckled before I even saw her. And then arms wrapped around me. John. He was shaking too, but holding me like the world wouldn't let go again. I buried my face in his shoulder, sobbing so hard it hurt. Todd froze behind me, unsure, breathing like he'd just outrun death itself. But before we could feel safe, Dan stepped from behind a tree, a gun in his hand. A silence so sharp it cut through the sirens. I didn't scream at first, my lungs forgot how. He raised the weapon slowly, expression unreadable. John instinctively moved in front of me. I heard the safety click. Everything slowed. Don's hand trembled just barely. His voice was low, guttural. "You ruined it, all of you." Then chaos. John lunged. They crashed to the ground. The gun went off. I screamed. Todd darted forward, tackled Don's wrist, pried the gun from his grip. Police officers surged from the tree line, guns drawn, voices booming commands. In seconds, Dan was pinned to the ground, screaming into the earth as the handcuffs clicked. I stood there, frozen, bleeding from my lip, shaking, The nightmare unraveled in front of me, thread by thread. I watched Dan hauled away, spitting curses, calling me a liar, a whore, a fake, but it didn't matter anymore. Everyone saw him now, not as a visionary. Not as a man with a message, just another predator with a Wi-Fi connection and a god complex. Todd didn't run, he didn't fight. He handed over the phone with all the recordings. The messages, the proof. He sat down on the forest floor and cried. And I believed for a moment that part of him was just as trapped as I had been. The weeks that followed were a blur of hospitals, statements, police reports, and exhaustion. My mother barely left my side. John stayed longer than he promised. Todd was arrested but treated differently given leniency for cooperating. A judge even said he showed signs of rehabilitation. Now, every time I scroll through Instagram, I pause on a perfect photo and remember the cabin. The lies, the look in Don's eyes when he thought he controlled me. I remember what it felt like to be reduced to nothing but a body, a brand, a bargaining chip. And yet, I'm still here, not just a picture, not just a profile. A person, a survivor. Sometimes, I post again. Not thirst traps, not filters, just me, no makeup, no pretense. I let the world see the cracks, because I earned every scar.